When my boyfriend introduced me as just a friend at his brother's wedding, I tried to dance with him during the slow songs, and he physically stepped away from me in front of 200 guests. I stood there in my emerald dress, watching him escort his ex-girlfriend to the dance floor instead. The next morning, I packed my belongings and moved into the apartment I'd been secretly viewing for weeks. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The fairy lights strung across the outdoor pavilion at Meadowbrook Estate cast a golden glow over what should have been one of the most romantic evenings of the year. Jake's brother Michael was marrying his college sweetheart in a ceremony that Pinterest boards were made of, complete with vintage lace, garden roses, and enough string quartet music to soundtrack a Jane Austen adaptation. I had spent 3 weeks choosing the perfect dress for this occasion, an emerald green silk number that complemented my dark hair and made me feel confident enough to navigate the complex family dynamics I was about to encounter. After 18 months of dating Jake Morrison, this wedding represented my first major introduction to his extended family and social circle. We had attended casual gatherings before, but nothing approaching the formal significance of a family wedding where relationships are evaluated, futures are discussed, and intentions are silently assessed by relatives who have been waiting to meet the woman their son or brother has been seeing. The morning had begun with promise. Jake had complimented my appearance as we prepared to leave our shared apartment, noting how the dress color brought out my eyes, and how excited he was to introduce me to family members who lived across the country and whom I had only heard about through stories. His enthusiasm seemed genuine, and I had felt that familiar flutter of anticipation about deepening our relationship through shared experiences with people who mattered to him. The drive to the venue had been filled with conversation about his childhood memories, with various relatives, funny stories about his brother's relationship journey, and casual mentions of how much his family would enjoy meeting me. These conversations reinforced my assumption that this wedding would serve as a natural progression in our relationship development, moving from private couple to public partnership acknowledged by his broader social network. However, the first indication that my expectations might not align with reality came during the cocktail hour preceding the ceremony. When Jake's aunt approached us with obvious curiosity about my identity and relationship to the family, his introduction stopped my heart with its casual dismissiveness. "This is Emma," he had said, his arm dropping from around my waist to his side. "She's a friend from the city." The word friend hung in the warm evening air like a discordant note in what had otherwise been a harmonious prelude to celebration. I managed to maintain my smile while shaking hands with his aunt, who looked between us with the confusion of someone trying to reconcile Jake's body language with his verbal introduction. The awkwardness lasted only moments before conversation moved to other topics, but the seed of doubt had been planted. Perhaps it was simply nervousness about family scrutiny, I reasoned. Some people preferred to avoid relationship interrogation during formal events, choosing to introduce romantic partners in more casual settings where conversations could develop naturally without the pressure of family evaluation. I decided to give him the benefit of the doubt while remaining alert to whether this pattern would continue throughout the evening. The ceremony itself was beautiful, with Michael and Sarah exchanging vows that spoke of partnership, mutual respect, and shared dreams for their future together. Watching them promise to support each other through all of life's challenges, I found myself imagining similar moments in my own future, naturally including Jake in those mental images. The romantic setting and emotional significance of the occasion reinforced my expectations that this evening would represent meaningful relationship development. During the cocktail reception that followed the ceremony, the pattern of casual dismissiveness continued in ways that became increasingly difficult to rationalize as simple nervousness. When introduced to Jake's college friends, I was again presented as Emma, a friend of mine. When his grandfather asked about my relationship to the family, Jake responded with vague references to knowing each other from work, despite the fact that we had met through mutual friends and had never been professional colleagues. Each introduction felt like a small betrayal, diminishing the significance of our relationship and reducing me to generic social companion rather than romantic partner. The accumulated impact of these interactions created a growing sense of disconnection from the celebration, as if I were attending as an observer rather than as someone whose presence held meaning within the context of family relationships. The most painful moment came when Jake's cousin mentioned how nice it was to finally meet Jake's girlfriend, using the word that Jake himself had consistently avoided throughout the evening. His immediate correction was swift and emphatic. "Oh, we're not dating," he said with a laugh that sounded forced even to my ears. "Emma's just a good friend who needed a wedding date." The lie was so blatant, so completely contrary to the reality of our 18-month relationship that I felt physically disoriented by the cognitive dissonance. We had been sharing an apartment for 6 months, had integrated our social circles, had discussed future vacation plans and career decisions that assumed continued partnership. The reduction of our relationship to casual friendship requiring wedding date assistance felt like erasure of everything meaningful we had built together. But the evening's humiliation had not yet reached its crescendo. That moment arrived during the reception's dancing portion, when the band began playing the slow, romantic songs that traditionally bring couples together for intimate moments on the dance floor. Watching Michael and Sarah sway together as newlyweds, surrounded by other couples celebrating love and partnership, I felt the natural urge to share that connection with Jake. "Dance with me?" I asked, extending my hand toward him with the kind of smile that had worked countless times during our private moments together. His response will be permanently etched in my memory as one of the most humiliating experiences of my adult life. Instead of taking my hand or offering any explanation for declining, Jake physically stepped backward, creating visible distance between us that everyone nearby could observe. "I don't really dance at family events," he said, his voice carrying none of the warmth that usually characterized our interactions. The rejection felt like a physical blow, made worse by its public nature and complete contrast to his behavior during our private relationship. We had danced together dozens of times in our apartment, at bars with friends, during date nights when slow songs played. His sudden aversion to dancing felt less about personal preference and more about public acknowledgement of our relationship status. What followed made the situation exponentially worse. While I stood processing the rejection and trying to maintain composure in front of his family members, Jake walked directly across the dance floor to where his ex-girlfriend Rebecca was standing with her date. I watched in stunned silence as he extended the same invitation to her that he had just declined from me, and she accepted with obvious pleasure. Rebecca Chen had been Jake's college girlfriend, someone he had mentioned occasionally as part of his past relationship history, but whom he had described as ancient history, with no ongoing significance in his current life. She had attended the wedding with her own date, someone I had assumed was her current romantic partner, making Jake's invitation even more inappropriate and confusing. Yet there they were, swaying together to the same romantic music that he had refused to share with me, their familiar comfort with each other evident in their synchronized movement and easy conversation. The song was At Last by Etta James, a choice that felt cruelly ironic as I watched my boyfriend dance intimately with another woman while I stood alone in my emerald dress, feeling like an unwelcome intruder at an event where I had expected to be welcomed as family. The dance lasted the entirety of the song, approximately 4 minutes that felt like hours, as I maintained my composure while internally processing the complete reversal of my relationship expectations. Other family members had begun to notice the dynamic, their glances shifting between Jake dancing with Rebecca and me standing alone, their expressions ranging from confusion to what appeared to be sympathy. When the song ended, Jake returned Rebecca to her date with obvious reluctance, their parting including a lingering hug that suggested deeper connection than casual friendship. He then approached me as if nothing unusual had occurred, his demeanor casual and his expression suggesting that he expected normal conversation to resume without acknowledgement of what had just transpired. "Great wedding," he said, his tone carrying the same lightness he might use when discussing weekend weather. I stared at him for several seconds, searching his face for any indication that he understood the impact of his behavior, or the message it had communicated to everyone present. Finding no evidence of such awareness, I made a decision that surprised us both with its immediate clarity. "I'm ready to leave," I said quietly, my voice steady despite the emotional turmoil I was experiencing internally. The drive home passed in tense silence, with Jake apparently assuming that my mood would improve with time and privacy. He made several attempts at casual conversation about the ceremony, the reception, food, and mutual acquaintances we had encountered, but I responded with minimal engagement while processing the evening's revelations about his true feelings regarding our relationship. By the time we reached our shared apartment, I had achieved perfect clarity about what needed to happen next. The evening had provided undeniable evidence that Jake viewed our relationship fundamentally differently than I did, and that difference was irreconcilable with my expectations for partnership based on mutual respect and public acknowledgement. "We need to talk," I said as we entered our living room, the space where we had shared countless evenings that now felt like memories from a relationship that had never been as significant as I had believed. But Jake's response to my request for serious conversation provided the final confirmation that we were living in completely different versions of the same relationship. "Can we do this tomorrow?" he asked, already moving toward the bedroom. "I'm exhausted from the wedding, and I have early meetings all week." The casual dismissal of my need for immediate conversation about behavior that had fundamentally humiliated me in front of his entire family demonstrated a level of disregard that completed my understanding of how little he valued my feelings or our relationship. At that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that continuing this relationship would require accepting a level of disrespect that I was no longer willing to tolerate. That night, I lay awake in our shared bed while Jake slept peacefully beside me, his breathing steady and untroubled by concerns about the evening's events or their impact on our relationship future. The contrast between his peaceful sleep and my wide-awake clarity about our fundamental incompatibility provided the final motivation I needed to make the decision that had been crystallizing throughout the evening. I spent those wakeful hours mentally cataloging the apartment viewings I had been attending secretly over the past month, a preparation that I had justified as contingency planning but which now revealed itself as intuitive preparation for exactly this moment. The studio apartment in Brookline had been my favorite, with large windows, hardwood floors, and enough space for independent living that would allow me to rebuild my life according to my own standards, rather than accepting treatment that diminished my self-worth. By dawn, I had achieved complete emotional clarity about what needed to happen next. The woman who had attended the wedding hoping for relationship progression had been replaced by someone who understood that accepting Jake's version of our relationship would require abandoning her own standards for partnership based on mutual respect and public acknowledgement. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The morning brought Jake's typical routine of shower, coffee, and preparation for another week of work meetings that apparently took precedence over addressing relationship concerns that would have kept any caring partner awake with worry about their significant other's emotional state. His casual "have a good day" as he left for the office felt like the period at the end of a sentence I had been trying to ignore for months. Within 2 hours of his departure, I had contacted the Brookline landlord, arranged for immediate lease signing, and begun the systematic process of reclaiming my independence from a relationship that had been diminishing my self-worth through accumulated small betrayals that had culminated in public humiliation. The moving truck arrived that afternoon, and by evening I was arranging my belongings in a space that belonged entirely to me, free from the need to accommodate someone who had demonstrated through his actions that he viewed me as convenient companionship rather than valued partnership. When Jake returned to our former shared apartment to find my belongings gone and a brief note explaining my decision, his shocked phone calls revealed that he had been genuinely surprised by consequences that seemed inevitable to everyone except him. But by then, I was already settled in my new space, beginning the process of rebuilding my life according to standards that no longer included accepting public humiliation as the price of romantic companionship. The morning light streaming through the windows of my new Brookline studio apartment illuminated more than just my carefully arranged belongings. As I sat cross-legged on my hardwood floors with 18 months of text messages, photos, and memories spread before me like evidence in a case I had never intended to build, patterns emerged that had been invisible while I was living inside them. The systematic analysis began with a simple question that had haunted my sleepless night after the wedding. How had I missed the signs that Jake viewed our relationship so fundamentally differently than I did? The answer required examining not just the obvious moments of dismissal but the subtle patterns of behavior that had trained me to accept diminished recognition as normal relationship dynamics. The first pattern that emerged involved what I began thinking of as relationship compartmentalization. Jake had consistently maintained rigid boundaries between different aspects of his social life, presenting me differently to various groups in ways that minimized the significance of our romantic connection. These presentations had evolved gradually over 18 months, making each individual instance seem reasonable, while the cumulative effect systematically erased my actual role in his life. The early months of our relationship had involved primarily private dates and small group gatherings, where relationship dynamics remained ambiguous by default. When we attended concerts with mutual friends or visited restaurants in neighborhoods where we were unlikely to encounter his broader social circle, the question of how he introduced me rarely arose. This period had allowed me to assume that public acknowledgement would develop naturally as our relationship deepened and became more established. However, reviewing our social media presence revealed telling patterns that contradicted this assumption. While my Instagram account included photos of us together with captions that clearly indicated romantic partnership, Jake's social media maintained careful ambiguity about our relationship status. Photos that included both of us were captioned with generic references to great evening or fun times, without any indication that I held special significance beyond casual friendship. When mutual acquaintances commented on these photos with questions about our relationship status, Jake's responses consistently deflected rather than confirmed romantic involvement. Comments like, "Are you two dating?" received replies such as, "Just enjoying good company," or "Emma's great to hang out with," instead of straightforward acknowledgement of our partnership. The social media analysis extended to his treatment of relationship milestones that typically warrant public recognition. Our 6-month anniversary passed without any social media acknowledgement, despite his history of commemorating significant dates in previous relationships that I had observed through his archived posts. Valentine's Day, my birthday, and other occasions that provided natural opportunities for public displays of affection were consistently handled through private gestures, without corresponding public recognition. This pattern of private intimacy combined with public ambiguity had trained me to appreciate the personal attention while accepting the absence of public acknowledgement as evidence of his preference for privacy rather than indication of limited commitment to our relationship. The wedding had shattered this interpretation by demonstrating that his privacy preferences were selective, applying only to his relationship with me, while his comfort with public displays extended readily to interactions with other women. The second major pattern involved what I recognized as introduction inflation for other relationships versus introduction deflation for ours. While Jake consistently introduced me in terms that minimized our connection, his references to other women in his life consistently emphasized their importance and his positive regard for their contributions to his personal and professional development. His ex-girlfriend Rebecca, whom he had claimed represented ancient history with no ongoing significance, appeared in his conversations with frequency that contradicted this characterization. References to Rebecca's insight about that restaurant, or "something funny Rebecca mentioned," occurred regularly during our private conversations, suggesting ongoing contact that he had never explicitly discussed with me. More significantly, when mutual friends inquired about Rebecca during group conversations, Jake's descriptions emphasized her intelligence, professional accomplishments, and positive influence on his personal development during their college relationship. These descriptions painted her as someone who had contributed meaningfully to his growth and who continued to warrant respect and affection despite their romantic relationship having ended. The contrast between his enthusiastic descriptions of Rebecca's qualities and his casual dismissal of our current relationship became starkly apparent when I systematically reviewed our conversations over 18 months. While he had never described me to others in terms that emphasized my professional accomplishments, personal qualities, or positive influence on his life, these elements featured prominently in how he discussed other women, including not only Rebecca but female colleagues and acquaintances whose impact on his life he readily acknowledged. This pattern extended to his family communications, which I had access to through overheard phone conversations and casual references during our private time together. When his mother inquired about his personal life during their weekly calls, his descriptions of me remained vague and brief, while his updates about professional relationships, friendships, and other personal developments received detailed discussion that suggested their greater importance in his life narrative. The third pattern involved relationship milestone avoidance that had effectively prevented our partnership from developing the markers typically associated with serious romantic commitment. While 18 months of dating normally includes discussions about future planning, relationship integration, and deepening commitment, Jake had systematically avoided or deflected conversations that might establish our relationship as a long-term partnership with shared goals and mutual investment. Holiday planning provided clear examples of this avoidance pattern. When Christmas approached during our first year together, Jake had made separate plans to visit his family without extending an invitation for me to join him, despite the fact that many couples at our stage of relationship development include partners in family holiday celebrations. His explanation focused on family complexity and travel logistics, rather than any indication that he viewed our relationship as insufficiently developed for family integration. Spring break planning had followed similar patterns, with Jake organizing a trip with college friends that excluded romantic partners, despite the fact that other participants were bringing their significant others. His explanation emphasized the group's tradition of quote, trips, without acknowledging that this tradition apparently applied selectively, excluding current girlfriends, while accommodating previous relationship partners who had been integrated into group activities during earlier years. Summer vacation discussions had revealed perhaps the most telling aspect of his milestone avoidance patterns. When I suggested planning a weekend trip together to celebrate our first anniversary, Jake's enthusiasm was notably limited compared to his excitement about other travel opportunities. His suggestions focused on brief local excursions, rather than the kind of significant travel experiences that couples typically use to deepen their relationship and create shared memories. The vacation planning conversations revealed his comfort with spending substantial money and time on travel with friends, family members, and professional colleagues, while maintaining strict limitations on similar investments and experiences with me. This pattern suggested that he viewed our relationship as insufficient justification for the kind of significant time and financial commitments that he readily made for other relationships in his life. The fourth major pattern involved emotional labor asymmetry, where I consistently provided support, understanding, and accommodation for his needs, while receiving minimal reciprocal consideration for my own emotional requirements. This asymmetry had developed gradually through small interactions that established expectations for relationship dynamics that increasingly favored his preferences over balanced partnership. Career stress support provided clear examples of this asymmetry. When Jake faced challenging work situations, I consistently offered emotional support, practical assistance, and scheduling accommodation that prioritized his professional needs over my own personal and professional commitments. These support efforts included everything from researching solutions to his work problems, to adjusting my own social plans to provide him with quiet evenings when he needed to focus on professional challenges. However, when I faced similar career stresses or personal challenges, his support remained limited to brief expressions of sympathy without corresponding practical assistance or scheduling adjustments to accommodate my needs. The contrast became particularly apparent during my job transition period, when his response to my professional uncertainty remained superficial, despite the significant emotional support I had provided during his own career challenges. Social planning revealed additional aspects of this asymmetry, with our shared activities consistently reflecting his preferences for venues, timing, and activities, while my suggestions received polite acknowledgement without corresponding implementation. Restaurant choices, entertainment options, and weekend activities had gradually shifted toward his preferences through a process where my accommodating nature enabled his assumptions that his preferences should take precedence in relationship decision-making. The emotional labor analysis extended to household management in our shared apartment, where responsibilities had become distributed according to my willingness to handle tasks that he preferred to avoid, rather than through negotiated agreements that reflected equal partnership investment. This distribution had occurred gradually through my desire to maintain harmony, and his comfort with allowing me to assume increasing responsibility for shared living space management. The fifth pattern involved future planning exclusion, where Jake consistently made personal and professional decisions without consulting me or considering the impact on our relationship development. These decisions had accumulated over 18 months to create a life trajectory that assumed my continued accommodation without requiring his reciprocal consideration of my goals and preferences. Professional development decisions provided the clearest examples of this exclusion pattern. When Jake received opportunities for additional training, conference attendance, or project assignments that would affect his schedule and availability, he made decisions based solely on his individual career goals without discussing the impact on our shared time or relationship development. These decisions consistently prioritized his professional advancement over our relationship stability or shared experience opportunities. Social commitment patterns followed similar trajectories, with Jake accepting invitations and making social plans based on his individual preferences, without considering my interest in participating or my availability to join activities where partners were welcome. This approach to social planning had gradually reduced my integration into his broader social circle, while maintaining his full participation in activities that excluded me. Financial planning discussions had revealed perhaps the most significant aspect of his future planning exclusion patterns. Despite sharing living space and many expenses, Jake's financial decisions remained entirely individual, without consideration of how his spending choices affected our shared household budget or my own financial planning requirements. This approach to financial independence extended beyond reasonable personal autonomy to exclude me from discussions about major purchases or financial commitments that would affect our shared living situation. The comprehensive pattern analysis revealed that Jake's behavior at the wedding represented not an isolated incident of poor judgment under social pressure, but the culmination of 18 months of systematic relationship minimization that had gradually trained both of us to accept my diminished status as normal relationship dynamics. Each individual instance of this pattern had seemed manageable or explainable at the time, but their cumulative effect had created a relationship where my needs, feelings, and preferences consistently ranked lower than his individual comfort and social positioning. Understanding these patterns provided crucial clarity about why the wedding incident had felt so devastating despite my difficulty articulating exactly what had been wrong with his behavior. The public dismissal and humiliation had simply made visible the relationship dynamics that had been operating privately for months, revealing the extent to which I had been accommodating treatment that fundamentally contradicted my expectations for partnership based on mutual respect and consideration. The pattern recognition process also revealed my own contributions to these dynamics through consistent accommodation and excuse-making that had enabled Jake's behavior to continue without consequences. My desire to be understanding and supportive had created a relationship environment where his preferences took precedence by default, while my own needs remained secondary to maintaining harmony and avoiding conflict. This understanding generated both clarity about why the relationship had become unsustainable and determination to establish different standards for future relationships that would require mutual respect and consideration rather than one-sided accommodation. The wedding had provided the catalyst for recognizing patterns that might otherwise have continued indefinitely, gradually eroding my self-respect through accumulated small compromises that served his comfort while diminishing my own relationship satisfaction. The mornings spent analyzing 18 months of relationship patterns had transformed my understanding from confused hurt about wedding night treatment to clear comprehension of systematic dynamics that had made such treatment inevitable. This clarity provided the foundation for rebuilding my life according to standards that would prevent similar patterns from developing in future relationships. The documentation process began with a methodical examination of digital evidence that would either validate my assessment of our relationship dynamics or reveal that my perceptions had been distorted by emotional reactions to a single difficult evening. Sitting at my small dining table in my new apartment, surrounded by printed screenshots, handwritten timelines, and carefully organized folders of correspondence, I embarked on what would become the most comprehensive self-advocacy project I had ever undertaken. The systematic approach was necessary because Jake's response to finding my belongings gone had been immediate and intense, with phone calls that alternated between bewilderment, anger, and attempts at emotional manipulation designed to convince me that I had overreacted to what he characterized as a minor social awkwardness. His narrative positioned the wedding incident as an isolated moment of poor judgment under family pressure, dismissing my interpretation as dramatic overreaction that threatened to destroy an otherwise healthy relationship over trivial social missteps. However, the evidence compilation process would either support his dismissive characterization or demonstrate that the wedding incident represented a pattern of systematic disrespect that had been developing over 18 months through accumulated behaviors that individually seemed minor, but collectively created a relationship environment fundamentally incompatible with mutual respect and partnership equality. The first category of evidence involved comprehensive analysis of introduction patterns across multiple social contexts throughout our relationship duration. This analysis required reviewing social media posts, examining photographs with associated comments, and reconstructing specific conversations where Jake had described me to others or introduced me in social situations. The social media evidence revealed striking consistency in Jake's avoidance of relationship acknowledgement across all platforms and time periods. Instagram posts that included both of us consistently avoided captions that would indicate romantic partnership, instead using generic language that positioned me as social companion without special significance. Facebook relationship status had remained unspecified throughout our 18-month relationship, despite his previous relationships being acknowledged publicly through relationship status updates and couple-oriented posts. The photographic evidence proved particularly revealing when analyzed systematically. While candid photos clearly showed intimate body language and romantic positioning that would typically characterize couple relationships, Jake's posted selections consistently chose images where physical positioning remained ambiguous enough to avoid definitive relationship implications. Photos where we appeared obviously romantic in nature had been excluded from his social media presence entirely, despite his tendency to share personal moments from other aspects of his life. The comment analysis provided additional evidence of systematic relationship minimization. When mutual acquaintances commented on posts with questions about our relationship status or assumptions about romantic involvement, Jake's responses consistently deflected or provided misleading information rather than straightforward acknowledgement. These responses formed a pattern of active relationship concealment rather than passive privacy preferences. The text message analysis constituted the second major category of evidence, requiring comprehensive review of 18 months of communication patterns that would either demonstrate mutual respect and consideration or reveal asymmetrical relationship dynamics where my needs and preferences consistently received secondary consideration compared to his individual goals and comfort. The communication pattern analysis revealed significant disparities in emotional labor distribution, with my messages consistently providing support, encouragement, and practical assistance for his personal and professional challenges, while his responses to my similar needs remained brief and superficial. This pattern was quantifiable through message length analysis, emotional content assessment, and practical support offering frequency that demonstrated measurable differences in relationship investment levels. Career support communications provided particularly clear evidence of this asymmetry. During Jake's job transition period 6 months into our relationship, my text messages had included extensive research assistance, emotional support during stressful interview processes, and celebration of his professional achievements. The messages demonstrated substantial time investment and emotional engagement with his professional development goals. However, when I faced my own career challenges 4 months later, his text responses remained limited to brief expressions of general encouragement, without corresponding practical assistance or detailed emotional support. The contrast was measurable through word count analysis, specific advice offering, and follow-up conversation engagement that revealed systematic differences in support provision. The social planning text analysis revealed additional patterns of asymmetrical consideration, with my suggestions for shared activities consistently receiving polite acknowledgement without implementation, while his preferences received immediate enthusiastic agreement and detailed planning engagement. This pattern extended across restaurant selections, entertainment choices, weekend activities, and vacation planning discussions that demonstrated whose preferences took precedence in relationship decision-making processes. The third category of evidence involved systematic analysis of financial relationship dynamics through shared expense tracking, individual spending pattern documentation, and financial planning conversation reconstruction. This analysis would determine whether our financial interactions reflected partnership equality or patterns where my resources and financial flexibility consistently accommodated his preferences without reciprocal consideration. The shared expense analysis revealed that while we had theoretically agreed to split major shared costs equally, the practical implementation had gradually shifted toward arrangements that favored his financial convenience while requiring greater flexibility and accommodation from my personal budget management. Rent payments, utility bills, and household expenses had been structured according to his preferred payment schedules and methods, without consideration of my banking arrangements or cash flow preferences. The individual spending analysis proved even more revealing. demonstrating that Jake made significant personal purchases and financial commitments without consulting me about the impact on our shared household budget, or our ability to engage in shared activities that required financial resources. His individual spending priorities consistently took precedence over shared experience opportunities, suggesting that he viewed our relationship as secondary to his personal financial goals. The vacation planning financial analysis provided perhaps the most compelling evidence of asymmetrical relationship investment. While Jake readily committed substantial personal resources to travel experiences with friends, family members, and professional colleagues, his enthusiasm for similar financial commitments to shared travel experiences remained notably limited. The budget allocations he considered reasonable for other relationships exceeded by significant margins what he viewed as appropriate spending for our romantic partnership. The fourth major evidence category involved comprehensive analysis of time allocation patterns that would demonstrate whether Jake invested relationship development time proportional to the significance he claimed our partnership held in his overall life priorities. This analysis required reconstruction of 18 months of scheduling decisions, time commitment patterns, and availability allocation for relationship activities compared to other personal and professional priorities. The scheduling priority analysis revealed systematic patterns where my relationship time consistently yielded to other commitments, including professional obligations, social activities, and family responsibilities that could have been scheduled to accommodate our shared time. Weekend plans with me were routinely canceled or postponed for opportunities that Jake considered more important, while similar scheduling conflicts rarely affected his commitments to other relationships. The availability pattern analysis demonstrated that Jake's most concentrated attention and highest energy periods were consistently reserved for activities that excluded me, while our shared time typically occurred during periods when his attention was divided or his energy levels were reduced from other commitments. This pattern suggested that our relationship received residual time allocation rather than intentional priority designation. The special occasion time investment analysis provided additional evidence of systematic relationship undervaluation. Birthdays, anniversaries, holidays, and other occasions that typically warrant focused attention and special planning had consistently received minimal time investment compared to similar occasions involving other relationships. His calendar allocation for relationship-focused activities remained consistently smaller than time commitments he made for professional networking, friendship maintenance, and family obligations. The fifth evidence category involved detailed examination of emotional support reciprocity through crisis response analysis, stress support provision, and emotional availability patterns during challenging periods. This analysis would determine whether our emotional relationship reflected mutual support and consideration, or patterns where I consistently provided emotional resources while receiving limited reciprocal support during my own difficult periods. The crisis response analysis examined how Jake reacted to my emotional needs during stressful situations, compared to the support I provided during his challenging periods. The evidence revealed significant disparities in emotional availability, practical assistance provision, and sustained support duration that demonstrated whose emotional needs received priority consideration in our relationship dynamics. The stress support analysis proved particularly revealing when examining the specific types of assistance provided during difficult periods. While I had consistently offered both emotional support and practical assistance during Jake's stressful situations, his support during my challenging periods remained limited to emotional expressions, without corresponding practical help or sustained availability for ongoing support needs. The emotional availability pattern analysis demonstrated systematic differences in attention quality and engagement depth during emotionally significant conversations. Jake's attention during my emotional needs remained partially divided and time-limited, while my availability during his emotional requirements had been comprehensive and sustained without time restrictions or attention limitations. The comprehensive evidence analysis also included examination of relationship milestone recognition patterns that would demonstrate whether Jake viewed our partnership as worthy of the public acknowledgement and celebration typically associated with serious romantic relationships. This analysis involved reconstruction of how he had handled anniversary dates, relationship development markers, and integration opportunities that would normally indicate relationship progression and deepening commitment. The milestone recognition analysis revealed consistent patterns of avoidance or minimization regarding events and anniversaries that would typically warrant celebration or acknowledgement in serious romantic partnerships. Our 6-month anniversary, 1-year anniversary, and other relationship markers had passed with minimal recognition, despite his history of commemorating similar milestones in previous relationships that I could observe through his archived social media presence. The relationship integration opportunity analysis examined situations where Jake could have naturally included me in family events, professional social functions, and friendship group activities where romantic partners were typically welcomed and included. The evidence demonstrated systematic exclusion from integration opportunities that would have established my role as his romantic partner within his broader social network. The conflict resolution pattern analysis provided additional evidence of relationship inequality through examination of how disagreements and relationship concerns were handled throughout our 18-month partnership. This analysis revealed consistent patterns where my relationship concerns received dismissive treatment, while his preferences and comfort needs took precedence in resolution processes. The comprehensive documentation process had required 3 full days of systematic evidence compilation, but the resulting analysis provided unambiguous validation that the wedding incident represented culmination rather than aberration in relationship dynamics that had been systematically undermining my emotional well-being and self-respect through accumulated patterns of dismissive treatment. This invalidation. The evidence compilation also revealed my own contribution to these patterns through consistent accommodation and conflict avoidance that had enabled Jake's behavior to continue without consequences. Understanding these enabling patterns would be essential for ensuring that future relationships developed according to mutual respect standards rather than one-sided accommodation that gradually eroded partnership equality. The documentation process had transformed my emotional confusion about the wedding incident into clear understanding of systematic relationship problems that were irreconcilable with healthy partnership standards. This clarity provided the foundation for strategic planning about how to communicate my decision to end our relationship in ways that would prevent manipulation attempts and establish clear boundaries for any future interactions. Most importantly, the evidence analysis had demonstrated that my decision to leave was based on comprehensive assessment of incompatible relationship dynamics, rather than emotional overreaction to isolated incident. This understanding provided confidence that I had made the correct decision and eliminated doubt that might otherwise have made me vulnerable to Jake's attempts at reconciliation based on promises to change behavior that the evidence suggested represented fundamental incompatibility rather than correctable relationship problems. The transformation of my studio apartment into a comprehensive personal development laboratory began with the recognition that evidence compilation alone would be insufficient for navigating the inevitable confrontations that would follow my departure from our shared living situation. Jake's increasingly desperate phone calls and text messages indicated that he would not accept my decision without attempting every form of emotional manipulation, logical argument, and social pressure that had previously proven effective in maintaining relationship dynamics favorable to his preferences. The preparation process required developing communication skills that would enable me to maintain clear boundaries while resisting manipulation techniques that had previously undermined my ability to advocate effectively for my own needs and standards. This development demanded systematic practice of assertive communication, boundary enforcement, and emotional regulation under pressure that would prevent me from being drawn back into relationship patterns that had gradually eroded my self-respect through accumulated compromises. The physical setup of my practice environment involved arranging furniture to simulate various confrontation scenarios that might occur during necessary interactions with Jake regarding our shared belongings, lease arrangements, and mutual social connections that would require coordination despite our relationship termination. The living room configuration allowed practice of maintaining appropriate physical positioning during difficult conversations, while projecting confidence and determination rather than uncertainty or availability for reconciliation discussions. Mirror positioning throughout the space enabled continuous monitoring of facial expressions, body language, and nonverbal communication patterns that might inadvertently signal openness to manipulation or uncertainty about my decision. The mirror practice revealed unconscious habits of apologetic body language and conciliatory facial expressions that had developed through 18 months of conflict avoidance and accommodation that had enabled Jake's dismissive treatment to continue without meaningful consequences. The communication script development process involved anticipating Jake's most likely arguments for reconciliation and preparing responses that would acknowledge his concerns while maintaining firm boundaries about relationship termination. This preparation required understanding his personality patterns well enough to predict his emotional appeals, logical arguments, and social pressure tactics that he would employ to convince me that leaving represented overreaction rather than appropriate response to systematic disrespect. The emotional manipulation recognition training formed a crucial component of this preparation process. Jake's communication style consistently included guilt induction, responsibility shifting, and emotional appeals designed to make me question my perceptions and decisions, rather than addressing the behavioral patterns that had created relationship problems. Developing immunity to these techniques required practicing responses that redirected conversation toward documented behaviors, rather than allowing discussions to shift toward my emotional reactions or his interpretations of isolated incidents. The boundary enforcement practice involved developing language that would communicate non-negotiable limits regarding future interactions, while avoiding explanations that might provide opportunities for argument or manipulation. This communication style required abandoning my habitual tendency to justify decisions through extensive explanation that had previously enabled Jake to debate my reasoning rather than accepting my conclusions about relationship compatibility. The voice training component focused on developing vocal delivery patterns that projected confidence and finality, rather than the questioning tone that had characterized my communication during previous relationship conflicts. This training revealed how my unconscious speech patterns had consistently communicated uncertainty and availability for compromise, even when my words expressed firm positions about important relationship issues. The practice sessions involved role-playing potential confrontation scenarios, using techniques drawn from conflict resolution resources that emphasized maintaining personal boundaries while avoiding escalation that might create additional complications during relationship termination processes. These scenarios included discussions about shared belongings, lease arrangements, mutual friendships, and future contact limitations that would require clear communication despite emotional intensity. The psychological preparation process addressed the emotional challenges associated with ending a relationship that had included genuine positive elements alongside the systematic problems that had made continuation impossible. This preparation involved developing strategies for acknowledging the relationship's beneficial aspects, while maintaining clarity about why those benefits could not compensate for fundamental incompatibilities regarding respect and partnership equality. This self-doubt management training proved particularly important given Jake's skill at presenting alternative interpretations of events that had previously made me question my own perceptions and reactions. This training involved developing confidence in my documented analysis and evidence-based conclusions, while resisting attempts to reframe systematic behavioral patterns as isolated incidents or misunderstandings that could be resolved through improved communication. The social pressure resistance preparation addressed the likelihood that Jake would attempt to involve mutual friends, family members, or social acquaintances in efforts to convince me to reconsider my decision. This preparation involved developing responses to concerned friends who might unknowingly enable manipulation attempts by encouraging reconciliation, without understanding the documented behavioral patterns that had necessitated relationship termination. The conversation redirect techniques focused on maintaining discussion focus on specific documented behaviors rather than allowing conversations to shift toward general relationship satisfaction, isolated positive memories, or promises of behavioral change that could not address fundamental incompatibilities. These techniques involved practicing responses that acknowledged concerns while redirecting attention toward patterns that could not be resolved through simple behavioral modifications. The emotional regulation practice involved developing strategies for maintaining composure during conversations that might include emotional appeals, anger, or other intense reactions designed to provoke responses that would undermine my position or provide opportunities for manipulation. This regulation required understanding my own emotional triggers and developing techniques for maintaining clarity and focus, despite attempts to create emotional confusion or guilt. The documentation presentation practice involved organizing evidence in formats that could be referenced during confrontations if necessary, while avoiding defensive behavior that might signal uncertainty about my conclusions. This practice emphasized presenting information as explanation for my decision rather than justification that required Jake's agreement or approval for validity. The future relationship standards development process involved translating insights gained from analyzing relationship patterns into specific criteria for evaluating potential romantic partnerships. This development required identifying behaviors and communication patterns that would indicate mutual respect and partnership equality, while establishing clear boundaries around treatment that would be unacceptable regardless of other positive relationship qualities. The personal value clarification exercise involved identifying core requirements for romantic relationships that could not be compromised without sacrificing personal integrity and self-respect. This clarification process revealed that I had been accepting treatment that contradicted my fundamental values regarding respect, honesty, and partnership equality, while justifying these compromises through focus on Jake's positive qualities that could not compensate for systematic dismissiveness. The confidence-building practice involved developing comfort with prioritizing my own needs and standards over maintaining relationships that required accepting diminished respect or consideration. This practice addressed underlying beliefs about relationship compromise that had enabled me to accept gradually declining treatment while viewing resistance as selfishness rather than appropriate self-advocacy. The accountability framework development involved establishing personal standards for recognizing and addressing relationship problems before they developed into systematic patterns that would require dramatic action for resolution. This framework included specific warning signs that would trigger immediate communication about concerns, rather than allowing accommodation and excuse-making to enable continued problematic behavior. The communication skills practice revealed significant improvements in my ability to articulate concerns clearly and maintain boundaries consistently despite pressure to compromise or accommodate. These improvements provided confidence that future relationships could develop according to mutual respect standards, rather than patterns where my needs consistently yielded to others' preferences through gradual accommodation. The conflict resolution skill development involved learning to address relationship concerns directly rather than avoiding confrontation that allowed problems to accumulate until they became irreconcilable. This skill development required overcoming habitual patterns of conflict avoidance that had enabled Jake's dismissive behavior to continue without consequences, while my resentment and dissatisfaction increased through unexpressed concerns. The negotiation training focused on developing ability to advocate for my needs and preferences in relationship decisions, rather than automatically accepting arrangements that favored others. Convenience. This training addressed underlying assumptions about relationship harmony that had led me to view advocacy for my preferences as potential sources of conflict that should be avoided, rather than normal aspects of healthy partnership dynamics. The personal boundary establishment involved identifying specific behaviors and treatment patterns that would be unacceptable in future relationships, regardless of other positive qualities or circumstances. These boundaries included requirements for public relationship acknowledgement, equitable emotional support, shared decision-making authority, and respectful communication during conflicts that could not be compromised without accepting diminished partnership status. The practice sessions demonstrated measurable improvement in communication effectiveness, boundary maintenance, and emotional regulation that provided confidence for navigating necessary interactions with Jake while maintaining clarity about relationship termination decisions. These improvements indicated that intensive preparation could rapidly develop skills that would prevent similar relationship patterns from developing in future partnerships. The comprehensive nature of this preparation process reflected recognition that ending the relationship successfully would require not only clarity about why continuation was impossible, but also practical skills for maintaining that clarity, despite inevitable pressure to reconsider based on emotional appeals, social expectations, or temporary behavioral changes that could not address fundamental compatibility issues. By the end of the preparation period, I had developed communication capabilities and emotional regulation skills that exceeded my previous levels significantly, providing foundation for both successful relationship termination and future partnership development based on mutual respect and consideration rather than accommodation that gradually undermined self-respect through accumulated compromises that served others' comfort while diminishing my own satisfaction and well-being. The development of a comprehensive strategic framework for rebuilding my life required systematic analysis of every aspect of personal and professional development that had been compromised or neglected during 18 months of prioritizing a relationship that consistently undermined my growth and self-respect. This framework would serve as the foundation for creating a life structure that would prevent similar patterns from developing while establishing standards for personal and professional relationships based on mutual respect and reciprocal investment. The strategic planning process began with honest assessment of areas where accommodation of Jake's preferences and schedule had limited my own development opportunities. This assessment revealed significant gaps in professional networking, skill development, personal interests, and social relationships that had been systematically neglected to maintain relationship harmony and accommodate his time requirements and social preferences. Professional development represented the most significant area requiring strategic intervention. During our relationship, my career advancement had been constrained by scheduling limitations that prioritized Jake's professional obligations and social commitments over opportunities for my own networking, additional training, or professional relationship development. Conference attendance, after-work networking events, and professional development workshops had consistently been declined or postponed to maintain availability for his schedule and relationship needs. The professional strategic framework involved identifying specific industry certifications, networking organizations, and skill development opportunities that could accelerate career advancement while building professional relationships independent of romantic partnership considerations. This framework included timeline development for completing advanced certifications in digital marketing analytics, joining professional associations that would provide networking opportunities, and establishing mentorship relationships with senior professionals in my field. The networking strategy component involved systematic identification of industry professionals whose expertise and career trajectories aligned with my professional development goals. This identification process required research into marketing technology companies, consulting firms, and innovative startups that were developing cutting-edge approaches to digital marketing integration with traditional marketing strategies. The skill development plan included specific technical competencies that would differentiate my qualifications in an increasingly competitive professional environment. These competencies included advanced data analysis techniques, artificial intelligence applications in marketing strategy, and international digital marketing approaches that could position me for leadership roles in companies with global market interests. The financial independence framework represented the second major strategic priority, requiring comprehensive analysis of spending patterns, saving goals, and investment strategies that would ensure economic security independent of any romantic partnership. This framework addressed the financial compromises that had developed during the relationship, where shared expenses and joint financial decisions had limited my individual financial planning and investment opportunities. The budget restructuring process involved eliminating expenses that had been justified through relationship considerations rather than personal value or necessity. This restructuring revealed significant monthly savings opportunities through revised housing, transportation, and entertainment allocations that could be redirected toward investment and emergency fund development. The investment strategy development involved education about financial planning approaches that could maximize long-term wealth building, while providing flexibility for career transitions or entrepreneurial opportunities that might arise during the next phase of personal development. This education included analysis of retirement account optimization, real estate investment possibilities, and portfolio diversification strategies appropriate for someone in early career development phases. The emergency fund establishment represented immediate financial priority, requiring systematic allocation of resources toward building financial security that would prevent future dependence on romantic partnerships for economic stability. This fund development provided psychological security and practical flexibility that would enable career and personal decisions based on opportunity and interest, rather than financial necessity. Personal interest redevelopment constituted the third major strategic component, addressing hobbies, creative pursuits, and intellectual interests that had been abandoned or minimized during the relationship to accommodate Jake's preferences and maintain focus on activities he found engaging or worthwhile. This redevelopment required honest assessment of authentic personal interests versus interests that had been adopted to maintain relationship compatibility. The creative pursuit revival involved returning to photography and creative writing projects that had been systematically neglected during the relationship. These pursuits had previously provided significant personal satisfaction and creative outlet, but had been gradually abandoned as relationship demands consumed increasing amounts of personal time and mental energy. The intellectual development plan included returning to graduate school consideration that had been postponed during the relationship due to time constraints and financial considerations that prioritized joint relationship goals over individual educational advancement. This plan involved researching graduate programs in marketing strategy and consumer psychology that could provide advanced expertise for senior marketing leadership roles. The physical wellness framework addressed health and fitness goals that had been compromised through relationship accommodation and lifestyle changes that prioritized shared activities over individual wellness maintenance. This framework included nutrition planning, exercise routine development, and wellness practices that would support energy levels and confidence during intensive personal and professional development phases. Social relationship reconstruction represented the fourth major strategic priority, requiring systematic rebuilding of friendships and social connections that had been neglected during focus on romantic relationship maintenance. This reconstruction involved honest assessment of relationships that had been damaged through reduced availability and investment during the 18-month period of romantic relationship prioritization. The friendship revival strategy involved reaching out to former close friends whose relationships had suffered during the period when Jake's social preferences had taken precedence over maintaining independent friendships. These relationships required careful rebuilding through consistent communication and investment that demonstrated renewed prioritization of these connections over romantic relationship considerations. The new social connection development involved joining organizations and activities that aligned with authentic personal interests rather than relationship compatibility considerations. These connections included professional networking groups, creative writing organizations, photography clubs, and volunteer activities that would provide social interaction based on shared interests rather than romantic relationship circumstances. The family relationship enhancement involved increased investment in family connections that had received reduced attention during focus on romantic relationship development. This enhancement included regular communication scheduling, visit planning, and participation in family activities that would strengthen these foundational relationships while providing emotional support during transition periods. The living situation optimization framework addressed housing arrangements that would support personal development goals while providing comfortable and inspiring environment for the intensive growth period ahead. This optimization involved analyzing current apartment features and limitations relative to personal productivity and wellness requirements. The workspace development component involved creating dedicated areas for professional development activities, creative pursuits, and personal planning that would support focused work on growth objectives. This development included ergonomic considerations, lighting optimization, and organizational systems that would maximize productivity during study and project completion sessions. The neighborhood integration strategy involved identifying community resources, recreational opportunities, and cultural activities that would provide enriching experiences while building local connections independent of romantic relationship considerations. This integration included exploring local libraries, fitness facilities, cultural venues, and community organizations that aligned with personal interests and development goals. The Personal Growth Measurement Framework established specific metrics and milestones that would enable tracking progress towards strategic objectives while maintaining motivation during challenging transition periods. This framework included quantifiable professional development goals, financial targets, social connection metrics, and personal satisfaction assessments that would provide clear indicators of successful life rebuilding. The professional advancement metrics included specific networking contact goals, skill certification completion timelines, and career advancement milestones that would demonstrate progress toward leadership positions and increased professional recognition. These metrics provided concrete objectives that could be pursued systematically while building confidence through measurable achievement. The financial independence measurements included savings targets, investment portfolio development goals, and debt reduction objectives that would provide economic security and freedom for future decision-making. These measurements enabled tracking progress toward financial goals that would support long-term independence and opportunity pursuit. The relationship quality assessments involve developing standards for evaluating personal and professional relationships based on mutual respect, reciprocal investment, and authentic compatibility, rather than convenience or accommodation patterns that had previously enabled unsatisfactory relationship dynamics to continue without addressing fundamental problems. The contingency planning component addressed potential challenges and setbacks that might arise during implementation of strategic framework objectives. This planning included strategies for managing Jake's continued contact attempts, handling mutual friend situations, and maintaining progress toward goals despite emotional challenges during transition periods. The communication boundary management involved establishing clear policies for any necessary interactions with Jake regarding practical matters while preventing manipulation attempts or emotional appeals that might undermine strategic objectives. These boundaries included specified communication methods, topic limitations, and time restrictions that would minimize disruption while handling necessary coordination. The social pressure management strategy addressed potential challenges from mutual friends or acquaintances who might encourage reconciliation without understanding the systematic relationship problems that had necessitated termination. This strategy included prepared responses that maintained boundary clarity while avoiding detailed explanations that might provide opportunities for debate or manipulation. The emotional regulation maintenance involved ongoing practices that would support psychological stability during inevitable difficult moments in the transition process. These practices included meditation routines, physical exercise scheduling, and professional counseling consideration that would provide emotional support while maintaining focus on strategic objectives. The 6-month implementation timeline provided structured approach to achieving strategic framework objectives, while maintaining realistic expectations about progress rates and challenge management. This timeline included monthly milestones that would enable progress assessment and strategy adjustment, while building momentum toward long-term goals that would create life satisfaction and personal fulfillment independent of romantic relationship status. The strategic framework represented comprehensive approach to personal development that would prevent repetition of relationship patterns that had compromised individual growth while establishing foundation for future relationships based on authentic compatibility and mutual respect, rather than accommodation that gradually undermined personal standards and self-respect through accumulated compromises that served others' comfort while diminishing individual satisfaction and achievement potential. The systematic reconstruction of meaningful relationships began with the recognition that 18 months of relationship prioritization had created significant gaps in the support network that would be essential for successful personal and professional development during the transition period ahead. The process required honest assessment of relationships that had been neglected, damaged, or abandoned during the period when romantic partnership demands had consistently taken precedence over friendship maintenance and professional relationship cultivation. The relationship audit revealed surprising patterns in how different people had responded to my reduced availability and investment during the Jake relationship period. Some friendships had withered entirely through mutual neglect and competing priorities, while others had maintained foundation strength despite minimal maintenance that suggested genuine compatibility and mutual respect that could survive temporary relationship challenges. The first category of relationship reconstruction involved reconnecting with professional colleagues whose relationships had been limited by scheduling constraints and availability restrictions that had prevented participation in after-work networking events, professional development workshops, and industry social functions. These professional relationships represented crucial resources for career advancement and strategic development that would be essential during the intensive growth period planned for the coming months. Sarah Martinez, my former colleague from the digital marketing agency where I had worked before joining my current company, represented the most promising opportunity for professional alliance development. During our 18-month friendship hiatus caused by my relationship scheduling limitations, Sarah had been promoted to creative director at a prestigious marketing firm specializing in technology company branding and strategic positioning. The reconnection process with Sarah required acknowledging the relationship neglect that had occurred while demonstrating renewed commitment to professional friendship that could provide mutual benefit through knowledge sharing, referral opportunities, and collaborative project development. The initial outreach conversation revealed that Sarah had maintained positive regard for my professional capabilities despite my absence from industry networking activities during the relationship period. Sarah's response to reconnection exceeded expectations, including immediate invitation to participate in her company's monthly innovation workshops, where marketing professionals explored emerging trends in digital strategy and consumer engagement techniques. These workshops provided access to industry thought leaders and strategic frameworks that would accelerate professional development while building relationships with professionals whose expertise could enhance career advancement opportunities. The workshop participation revealed that my analytical capabilities and strategic thinking skills had remained competitive despite reduced professional development investment during the relationship period. The positive feedback from workshop participants indicated that intensive focus on career advancement could rapidly restore professional reputation and positioning within the industry community. Sarah also provided insights into professional development opportunities that aligned with my strategic framework objectives, including advanced certification programs in marketing analytics and strategic planning that were offered through professional associations with strong industry recognition. Her guidance proved invaluable for prioritizing educational investments that would provide maximum career advancement impact within limited time and financial resources. The second major relationship reconstruction category involved reconnecting with personal friends, whose relationships had suffered through reduced availability and investment during focus on romantic partnership maintenance. These friendships required careful assessment to determine which relationships retained foundation strength sufficient for successful revival and which had been permanently damaged through extended neglect and competing priorities. Jessica Wong, my closest friend from graduate school, represented the most significant personal relationship requiring reconstruction efforts. During our 5-year friendship prior to the Jake relationship, Jessica had provided emotional support, intellectual stimulation, and social companionship that had contributed significantly to personal development and life satisfaction. The friendship had gradually deteriorated during the 18-month period, when Jake's social preferences and schedule requirements had consistently taken precedence over maintaining independent friendship commitments. The reconnection conversation with Jessica required honest acknowledgement of friendship neglect, while demonstrating understanding of how romantic relationship prioritization had damaged our connection. This conversation revealed that Jessica had interpreted my reduced availability as indication that our friendship held diminished value compared to romantic relationship benefits, creating hurt feelings that had persisted despite her intellectual understanding of relationship development dynamics. However, Jessica's response to sincere apology and commitment to friendship restoration demonstrated the resilience of relationships built on genuine compatibility and mutual respect. Her willingness to rebuild the connection provided access to emotional support and intellectual companionship that would be crucial during the challenging transition period ahead. Jessica's perspective on the Jake relationship proved particularly valuable, as her external observations had identified problematic patterns that I had been unable to recognize while experiencing them directly. Her feedback provided validation for concerns that I had been questioning while offering insights into relationship dynamics that could prevent similar patterns from developing in future romantic partnerships. The friendship reconstruction also provided access to Jessica's professional network in nonprofit management and social impact consulting, expanding career development possibilities beyond traditional marketing roles. Her connections included organizations focused on social justice marketing, environmental sustainability communication, and nonprofit strategic planning that aligned with personal values and interests that had been neglected during commercial marketing career focus. The third relationship development category involved establishing new professional mentorship connections that could provide guidance and support during intensive career advancement efforts. These mentorship relationships required identifying senior professionals whose career trajectories and expertise aligned with strategic development objectives, while offering mutual value through fresh perspective and analytical capabilities. Michael Thompson, Director of Strategic Planning at a marketing consulting firm specializing in technology companies, emerged as an ideal mentorship opportunity through introduction at Sarah's Innovation Workshop. Michael's career development from analytical roles to strategic leadership positions provided relevant guidance for advancement planning, while his expertise in technology marketing aligned with professional development interests. The mentorship relationship development required demonstrating value that could justify senior professional investment of time and expertise in supporting career advancement. This demonstration involved sharing analytical insights from current projects and offering research assistance for strategic initiatives that could benefit from additional analytical capacity. Michael's mentorship proved invaluable for understanding senior leadership perspectives on career development and professional positioning. His guidance addressed strategic thinking development, executive presence cultivation, and networking approaches that could accelerate advancement while avoiding common career development mistakes that limit promotion potential. The mentorship relationship also provided access to senior executive networks and strategic thinking frameworks that would have required years of independent development. Michael's introductions to other senior marketing professionals created networking opportunities that expanded career development possibilities while providing models for successful leadership approaches. The fourth alliance-building category involved developing relationships with service providers and advisors who could support comprehensive life development during transition period. These relationships included financial planning, wellness support, and personal development resources that would enable sustained progress towards strategic objectives while maintaining physical and emotional well-being during intensive change periods. Financial planning support proved essential for optimizing investment strategies and establishing economic security that would provide foundation for career and personal development decisions based on opportunity rather than financial necessity. The financial advisor relationship development required education about investment approaches while establishing accountability for savings and wealth-building objectives. Wellness support relationships included fitness training, nutrition guidance, and mental health counseling that would support physical and emotional stability during transition challenges. These relationships required investment of time and resources while providing crucial support for maintaining progress towards strategic objectives, despite inevitable difficult periods during major life changes. Professional development support included career coaching, presentation skills training, and leadership development resources that would accelerate advancement while building capabilities that could differentiate professional positioning within competitive career environments. These support relationships represented strategic investments in human capital development that would provide long-term career advantages. The fifth alliance category involved establishing community connections that would provide social support and personal enrichment, independent of romantic relationship status. These connections included volunteer organizations, recreational groups, and cultural activities that aligned with authentic personal interests while providing social interaction opportunities. Volunteer work with literacy programs provided meaningful contribution to community development while building relationships with professionals from diverse industries whose perspectives could enhance strategic thinking and problem-solving capabilities. The volunteer commitment also provided structure for personal time utilization that supported well-being while contributing to causes aligned with personal values. The photography club membership provided creative outlet and social connection based on authentic interests that had been neglected during relationship period. The club activities included workshops, exhibition opportunities, and social events that provided skill development while building friendships based on shared creative interests rather than romantic relationship circumstances. Cultural organization participation included museum volunteering and art appreciation groups that provided intellectual stimulation and social connection while supporting cultural institution development that aligned with community investment interests. These activities provided enriching experiences while building relationships with individuals whose interests and values complemented personal development objectives. The alliance-building process revealed that successful relationship development required authentic mutual interest and value exchange, rather than one-sided accommodation that had characterized problematic relationship patterns. The new relationships were established with clear understanding of reciprocal investment and mutual respect that would prevent development of patterns where personal needs consistently yielded to others' preferences. The comprehensive approach to relationship reconstruction and development created support network that could sustain progress towards strategic objectives, while providing emotional support, professional guidance, and social connection during transition challenges. This network represented strategic asset that would enable continued growth and development, while preventing isolation that could undermine confidence and progress toward independence goals. The alliance-building success demonstrated that authentic relationships based on mutual respect and shared interests could be developed rapidly when approached with genuine commitment and clear understanding of value exchange principles. This success provided foundation for future relationship development that would maintain independence while building meaningful connections that enhanced rather than diminished personal growth and professional advancement potential. The systematic analysis of Jake's reconciliation strategy began with comprehensive documentation of his communication attempts following the discovery that I had permanently relocated from our shared apartment. The pattern that emerged demonstrated sophisticated understanding of psychological pressure techniques combined with fundamental misunderstanding of the evidence-based decision-making process that had led to my departure from the relationship. Jake's initial response strategy relied heavily on emotional manipulation tactics that had previously proven effective during relationship conflicts, where accommodation and compromise had been my default responses to relationship tension. His early voicemail messages emphasized emotional distress, confusion about my motivations, and appeals to shared positive memories that had provided relationship satisfaction during periods when systematic problems remained less apparent. The emotional appeal approach included references to specific shared experiences, mutual enjoyment of activities, and expressions of love and commitment that positioned my departure as overreaction to temporary difficulties rather than rational response to documented patterns of dismissive treatment. These messages demonstrated his assumption that emotional intensity could override analytical assessment of relationship compatibility problems that had been developing systematically over 18 months. However, Jake's emotional manipulation strategy revealed significant gaps in his understanding of my personality and decision-making processes that had been obscured during the relationship by my accommodating responses to his preferences and conflict avoidance patterns that had prevented direct confrontation about systematic relationship problems. His approach assumed that emotional appeals would be sufficient to undermine logical analysis of documented behavioral patterns. The second phase of Jake's reconciliation strategy involved attempts to reframe the wedding incident as isolated mistake resulting from social pressure and family dynamics, rather than culminating example of systematic relationship dismissal patterns. This reframing technique included detailed explanations of his emotional state during the wedding, alternative interpretations of his behavior that minimized disrespectful elements, and promises of future behavioral changes that would address surface symptoms without acknowledging underlying compatibility problems. The reframing communications demonstrated Jake's skill at constructing alternative narratives that cast problematic behaviors in favorable light, while shifting responsibility toward external circumstances rather than personal choice patterns. His explanations for the wedding behavior included social anxiety about family judgment, concern about overwhelming family dynamics, and protective instincts designed to shield our relationship from family scrutiny that might create additional pressure. These explanations revealed sophisticated understanding of plausible justifications that could explain away problematic behavior while avoiding acknowledgement of systematic patterns that the wedding incident had revealed rather than created. Jake's narrative construction abilities had likely contributed to the relationship problems by enabling him to justify dismissive treatment through complex explanations that positioned accommodation as reasonable response to external pressures. The reframing strategy also included promises of behavioral modifications that would address specific incidents without acknowledging fundamental attitude problems regarding respect and partnership equality. These promises focused on surface-level changes such as improved communication about social events, increased consideration during family gatherings, and enhanced awareness of public relationship acknowledgement, without addressing underlying issues regarding how he valued our partnership compared to other relationships and commitments. The third component of Jake's reconciliation approach involved enlisting support from mutual friends and acquaintances who could provide social pressure for relationship resumption without understanding the comprehensive analysis that had led to my departure decision. This social pressure campaign demonstrated strategic thinking about influence networks while revealing limited understanding of the evidence-based foundations that supported my conclusion about relationship incompatibility. The friend involvement strategy began with conversations where Jake presented simplified versions of our relationship conflict that emphasized my emotional reaction to wedding events, while minimizing the systematic behavioral patterns that had necessitated departure. These conversations positioned him as confused partner attempting to repair relationship damage caused by misunderstanding and miscommunication, rather than someone whose consistent behavioral choices had created irreconcilable compatibility problems. Several mutual friends contacted me with expressions of concern about relationship termination and encouragement to reconsider, based on their observations of Jake's apparent distress and commitment to reconciliation. These well-intentioned interventions demonstrated the effectiveness of Jake's narrative management, while revealing how successfully he had concealed the systematic relationship problems from our broader social network through careful presentation management. The friend involvement revealed additional aspects of Jake's relationship compartmentalization patterns, as different friends had received different versions of our relationship dynamics based on what would be most likely to generate sympathy and support for reconciliation efforts. Friends who valued relationship stability received narratives emphasizing temporary misunderstandings, while friends who prioritized emotional expression received versions highlighting his emotional attachment and commitment to relationship repair. However, the social pressure campaign also revealed limitations in Jake's understanding of my personality transformation during the relationship departure process. His assumption that social pressure would override individual analytical conclusions demonstrated continued application of influence techniques that had worked during periods when accommodation and conflict avoidance had been my default responses to relationship challenges. The fourth element of Jake's reconciliation strategy involved escalation to dramatic gestures designed to demonstrate commitment intensity while creating social situations where refusing reconciliation would appear unreasonable or emotionally cruel. These gestures included unexpected apartment visits, workplace appearances, and public displays of romantic commitment that were intended to pressure reconsideration through social embarrassment and emotional intensity. The dramatic gesture approach included delivery of elaborate floral arrangements to my workplace, with messages emphasizing permanent commitment and willingness to change problematic behaviors. These deliveries created workplace attention and colleague curiosity that Jake likely expected would generate social pressure for relationship resumption, while demonstrating his emotional investment in reconciliation efforts. Workplace appearances represented escalation of pressure tactics through direct confrontation in professional environments, where maintaining composure and avoiding dramatic scenes would be essential for career reputation management. These appearances demonstrated Jake's willingness to risk my professional standing to achieve reconciliation goals, while revealing limited understanding of how his pressure tactics were reinforcing, rather than contradicting, my assessment of his relationship priorities. The public gesture strategy also included social media posts that referenced our relationship in ways designed to generate mutual friend responses that would create indirect pressure for reconciliation consideration. These posts positioned him as devoted partner working to repair relationship damage, while suggesting that my resistance to reconciliation represented unreasonable, emotional stubbornness, rather than rational analyses of fundamental incompatibility issues. The comprehensive analysis of Jake's reconciliation strategy revealed sophisticated understanding of emotional manipulation and social pressure techniques, combined with fundamental misassessment of the transformation that had occurred in my decision-making processes during the relationship departure period. His continued application of influence methods that had previously proven effective demonstrated inability to recognize that evidence-based analytical approaches had replaced accommodation patterns that had enabled relationship problems to persist without meaningful resolution. The strategy analysis also revealed Jake's continued prioritization of his own emotional needs and relationship goals over consideration of my clearly expressed boundaries and departure decisions. His unwillingness to respect my conclusion about relationship incompatibility demonstrated persistent patterns of dismissing my preferences and analytical capabilities when they conflicted with his desired outcomes. Jake's reconciliation efforts provided additional validation for the relationship departure decision by demonstrating that pressure tactics and manipulation attempts had replaced any genuine consideration of the behavioral changes that would be necessary to address fundamental compatibility problems. His focus on overcoming my resistance rather than addressing systematic relationship issues confirmed that reconciliation would restore previous problematic dynamics rather than creating partnership based on mutual respect and consideration. The opposition analysis revealed that successful maintenance of relationship termination boundaries would require sustained resistance to multiple pressure techniques while maintaining clarity about the evidence-based foundations that supported departure decisions. Jake's sophisticated understanding of influence tactics meant that boundary maintenance would require continuous vigilance and systematic application of the communication skills and emotional regulation capabilities developed during the preparation period. The analysis also demonstrated the importance of maintaining supportive relationships that could provide alternative perspectives during periods when social pressure and emotional manipulation might create doubt about departure decisions based on comprehensive analytical assessment. The alliance-building efforts provided crucial counterbalance to manipulation attempts by offering relationships based on authentic mutual respect rather than accommodation and compromise. Most significantly, the opposition analysis confirmed that Jake's reconciliation strategy demonstrated continued evidence of the fundamental compatibility problems that had necessitated relationship termination. His inability to respect clearly communicated boundaries and his continued prioritization of his preferences over my analytical conclusions provided ongoing validation that departure had been necessary for maintaining self-respect and establishing life patterns based on mutual respect rather than systematic accommodation of dismissive treatment. The comprehensive understanding of Jake's reconciliation approach provided strategic advantages for maintaining departure boundaries while avoiding manipulation techniques that might otherwise have undermined confidence in evidence-based decision-making that had led to relationship termination and commitment to building life patterns based on authentic partnership equality rather than accommodation of systematic disrespect. The psychological evolution from accommodation-oriented relationship partner to boundary-maintaining independent individual required confronting fundamental beliefs about personal worth, relationship dynamics, and the balance between compromise and self-respect that had shaped my decision-making patterns throughout the 18-month relationship with Jake. This transformation demanded systematic examination of underlying assumptions that had enabled systematic dismissal of my needs, while justifying continued investment in partnership that consistently prioritized his comfort over mutual consideration. The initial phase of internal transformation involved recognizing the cognitive dissonance that had developed between my intellectual understanding of healthy relationship standards and my practical acceptance of treatment that contradicted those standards. This dissonance had created psychological stress that manifested as persistent anxiety, self-doubt, and confusion about relationship satisfaction, despite obvious evidence of systematic problems that any objective observer would recognize as incompatible with respectful partnership. The cognitive examination process revealed deeply ingrained beliefs about relationship sacrifice and compromise that had been misapplied to situations where accommodation had become one-sided rather than mutual. These beliefs, originally developed through observation of successful long-term relationships where partners made reciprocal adjustments for shared benefit, had been extended to justify acceptance of arrangements where my flexibility consistently served Jake's preferences without corresponding consideration for my needs and goals. The belief system analysis uncovered assumptions about feminine relationship roles that had unconsciously influenced my acceptance of emotional labor distribution patterns and social positioning that diminished my individual identity in service of relationship harmony. These assumptions, absorbed through cultural messaging and family modeling, had created internal pressure to prioritize relationship maintenance over personal boundaries, even when relationship dynamics became systematically problematic. The examination process also revealed perfectionist tendencies that had contributed to relationship problems by creating internal pressure to resolve compatibility issues through increased effort and understanding, rather than recognizing when fundamental differences required relationship termination, rather than continued accommodation attempts. This perfectionism had manifested as belief that relationship problems could always be solved through better communication, increased empathy, or enhanced compromise, rather than acknowledging when incompatibilities were irreconcilable. The second component of psychological transformation involved developing comfort with prioritizing personal standards and boundaries over maintaining relationships that required systematic compromise of self-respect. This development required overcoming deeply ingrained patterns of conflict avoidance and people-pleasing that had contributed to enabling problematic relationship dynamics, while preventing direct confrontation about behavior that contradicted partnership equality principles. The boundary establishment process required learning to distinguish between healthy relationship compromise and self-diminishing accommodation that served others, comfort while undermining personal well-being. This distinction had been obscured during the relationship by gradual escalation of accommodation patterns that had normalized unreasonable treatment through incremental acceptance of increasingly problematic behavior. The development of boundary maintenance skills required practicing discomfort tolerance during situations where maintaining personal standards created temporary relationship tension, rather than defaulting to accommodation that would restore immediate harmony while perpetuating systematic problems. This practice involved deliberately choosing short-term discomfort over long-term relationship patterns that would continue undermining self-respect through accumulated compromises. The confidence-building component involved developing internal validation systems that could provide self-worth assessment independent of external approval or relationship status. This development required recognizing personal accomplishments, capabilities, and positive qualities that existed independently of romantic partnership recognition, while building comfort with making decisions based on individual assessment rather than seeking validation from others whose judgment might be influenced by their own relationship comfort or social expectations. The internal validation system development included systematic recognition of professional achievements, personal growth accomplishments, and character strengths that had been minimized or overlooked during periods when relationship satisfaction had become the primary measure of life success. This recognition process revealed significant areas of capability and achievement that provided foundation for self-confidence, independent of romantic relationship status. The third transformation component involved developing strategic thinking capabilities that could guide decision-making based on long-term consequences and personal development goals, rather than immediate emotional responses or social pressure considerations. This strategic development required learning to evaluate relationship decisions through analysis of patterns and trajectories, rather than focusing on isolated incidents or temporary improvements that might not address underlying compatibility problems. The strategic thinking development included learning to assess relationship dynamics through objective analysis of behavioral patterns, communication effectiveness, and mutual investment levels, rather than relying on emotional attachment or social expectations that might obscure systematic problems. This analytical approach provided tools for making relationship decisions based on evidence and compatibility assessment, rather than hoping that problematic patterns would improve through time or increased accommodation. The long-term perspective development involved learning to prioritize life goals and personal development objectives that extended beyond immediate relationship satisfaction. This perspective required recognizing that romantic partnerships should enhance rather than constrain individual growth, while providing mutual support for personal and professional development, rather than requiring sacrifice of individual goals for relationship maintenance. The fourth transformation element involved developing communication skills that could express personal needs and boundaries clearly while maintaining respectful interaction during difficult conversations. This skill development required overcoming habitual patterns of indirect communication and conflict avoidance that had prevented effective advocacy for personal needs, while enabling others to dismiss or ignore legitimate relationship concerns. The assertive communication development included learning to express disagreement and establish boundaries without aggression or defensive behavior that might escalate conflicts while failing to achieve productive resolution. This communication style required practicing clear expression of personal standards while maintaining openness to mutual problem-solving approaches that respected both partners' needs and preferences. The conflict navigation skill development involved learning to engage with relationship problems directly rather than avoiding confrontation that allowed systematic issues to persist without resolution. This engagement required developing comfort with temporary relationship tension, while working towards solutions that addressed underlying problems rather than accepting surface-level compromises that failed to resolve fundamental compatibility issues. The fifth component of psychological transformation involved establishing personal identity and life satisfaction that existed independently of romantic relationship status. This identity development required reconnecting with individual interests, goals, and values that had been minimized during periods when relationship harmony had taken precedence over personal development and individual fulfillment. The individual identity reconstruction involved rediscovering personal preferences, career aspirations, and social interests that existed independently of romantic partnership considerations. This reconstruction required distinguishing between authentic personal qualities and characteristics that had been adapted to maintain relationship compatibility, while potentially compromising individual authenticity and satisfaction. The independent life satisfaction development included building fulfillment through professional achievement, personal relationships, creative pursuits, and community involvement that provided meaning and satisfaction independent of romantic partnership status. This development created foundation for relationship decisions based on enhancement rather than necessity, while ensuring that future partnerships would contribute to rather than substitute for individual life satisfaction. The transformation process also involved developing resilience and emotional regulation capabilities that could maintain progress toward personal goals despite temporary setbacks, social pressure, or emotional challenges that might arise during transition periods. This resilience development required building coping strategies and support systems that could provide stability during difficult periods without compromising commitment to personal standards and boundary maintenance. The emotional regulation development included learning to manage anxiety, doubt, and temporary loneliness that might arise during independent living while maintaining focus on long-term personal development goals that would create lasting satisfaction and fulfillment. This management required developing comfort with temporary discomfort while working toward positive outcomes that would justify short-term challenges through long-term benefits. The comprehensive internal transformation represented fundamental shift from relationship-dependent identity to independent individual capable of building partnerships based on mutual respect and enhancement rather than accommodation and compromise that gradually undermined self-respect. This transformation provided psychological foundation for maintaining relationship standards that would prevent repetition of problematic patterns while enabling development of future partnerships based on authentic compatibility and mutual consideration. The transformation process revealed that personal change was possible through systematic effort and commitment to growth, while demonstrating that individual development could create foundation for healthier relationships based on mutual respect, rather than accommodation patterns that served one partner's comfort while diminishing the other's satisfaction and self-respect. This understanding provided motivation for continued personal development that would support both individual fulfillment and capacity for healthy partnership when appropriate opportunities arose based on genuine compatibility and mutual enhancement, rather than convenience or social expectations. The preparation intensification began when Sarah Martinez informed me that Jake had been making inquiries within our professional network about my current employment status, recent project assignments, and potential vulnerability to workplace disruption through continued reconciliation attempts. This intelligence indicated that his reconciliation strategy was evolving beyond personal emotional appeals toward professional pressure tactics that could threaten career advancement and workplace reputation if not addressed through comprehensive defensive planning. The professional threat assessment required immediate strategic response to prevent Jake's desperation from compromising years of career development and relationship building within industry networks that would be essential for long-term professional success. The assessment revealed specific vulnerabilities in my professional positioning that could be exploited through workplace disruption, client relationship interference, or reputation damage campaigns that might undermine career advancement opportunities. Sarah's information included details about Jake's inquiries regarding my current client responsibilities, project timelines, and supervisor relationships that suggested systematic intelligence gathering designed to identify optimal pressure points for workplace disruption. His questions had been presented as concerned inquiries from worried former partner, but their specificity and strategic focus indicated calculated assessment of professional vulnerabilities that could be leveraged for personal reconciliation objectives. The workplace protection strategy required immediate coordination with human resources personnel to establish formal documentation of unwanted contact and potential harassment concerns that could escalate beyond personal relationship conflict toward professional sabotage. This documentation process involved detailed recording of previous workplace visits, communication attempts, and social media references that had already created colleague curiosity and potential reputation complications. The human resources consultation revealed company policies regarding personal relationship conflicts that could affect workplace environment, including procedures for addressing unwanted contact from former romantic partners and protocols for documenting potential harassment situations that might require legal intervention. This consultation provided framework for addressing escalating contact attempts while maintaining professional reputation and career advancement opportunities. The Client Relationship Protection Assessment identified potential vulnerabilities where Jake's knowledge of my professional responsibilities and client relationships could enable interference that might damage business relationships or project outcomes. This assessment required developing contingency plans for client communication about potential disruption attempts while maintaining project continuity despite personal relationship complications. The second major preparation component involved developing comprehensive response strategies for potential public confrontation scenarios where Jake might attempt dramatic gestures designed to create social pressure for reconciliation consideration. The escalation pattern in his recent communication attempts suggested increasing desperation that might manifest through public displays intended to generate sympathy while positioning resistance to reconciliation as unreasonable emotional stubbornness. The public confrontation preparation involved identifying locations where such encounters were most likely to occur, including workplace environments, social venues, and community locations where Jake had previous knowledge of my routine activities. This identification process enabled development of specific response protocols that could minimize public disruption while maintaining clear boundaries about relationship termination decisions. The response protocol development included specific language for addressing public reconciliation attempts that would communicate boundary clarity while avoiding escalation that might create additional complications or safety concerns. These protocols required balancing firm boundary maintenance with professional demeanor that would protect workplace reputation and social relationships during potentially embarrassing public encounters. The witness preparation component involved informing key allies and professional contacts about potential public disruption scenarios, so they could provide appropriate support while understanding the context of any dramatic encounters that might occur in professional or social settings. This preparation enabled coordination of response approaches that would minimize reputation damage while demonstrating professional competence despite personal relationship complications. The third preparation element involved comprehensive financial security assessment to ensure that economic independence could be maintained despite any potential career disruption or legal expenses that might result from escalating harassment concerns. This assessment required evaluation of emergency fund adequacy, insurance coverage, and legal resource availability that could address potential complications without compromising long-term financial stability. The emergency fund analysis confirmed adequate resources for maintaining living expenses during potential employment complications, while pursuing legal remedies for harassment or professional interference. This financial security provided psychological confidence for maintaining boundary enforcement, despite potential economic consequences from workplace disruption attempts. The legal resource assessment involved consultation with employment law specialists regarding rights and remedies available for addressing workplace harassment from former romantic partners. This consultation provided understanding of documentation requirements, legal intervention options, and protective measures that could prevent professional sabotage while maintaining career advancement opportunities. The insurance coverage evaluation revealed adequate protection for legal expenses and potential income interruption that might result from harassment escalation requiring formal legal intervention. This coverage provided additional security for maintaining boundary enforcement without compromising financial stability through legal defense costs. The fourth preparation component addressed potential safety concerns that could arise from continued escalation of Jake's increasingly desperate reconciliation attempts. The pattern analysis suggested progression from emotional appeals toward more aggressive pressure tactics that might require safety planning and protective measures to prevent personal harm or property damage. The safety assessment involved evaluation of home security measures, personal protection strategies, and emergency response planning that could address potential escalation toward harassment or stalking behavior. This assessment required realistic evaluation of Jake's psychological state and escalation potential, while developing appropriate protective measures without creating unnecessary anxiety or paranoia. The home security enhancement included updated locks, security system evaluation, and neighbor communication regarding potential unwanted visits or property interference. These measures provided practical protection while demonstrating serious commitment to boundary enforcement that could discourage continued escalation attempts. The personal safety planning involved route variation, schedule modification, and communication protocols with allies who could provide assistance during potential confrontational encounters. This planning balanced reasonable precaution with continued engagement in normal activities, while maintaining awareness of potential risks from continued harassment attempts. The fifth major preparation element involves psychological reinforcement of decision-making foundations to maintain clarity and determination, despite intensifying pressure tactics and potential temporary emotional challenges from continued confrontation with former relationship dynamics. This reinforcement required systematic review of evidence and analysis that had supported relationship termination decisions while building emotional resilience for sustained boundary maintenance. The evidence review process involved comprehensive re-examination of documented behavioral patterns, relationship analysis conclusions, and strategic planning objectives that had guided departure decisions. This review reinforced logical foundations for relationship termination while providing psychological armor against manipulation attempts that might otherwise create doubt about departure necessity. Other Arav. The decision validation exercise included consultation with trusted allies, who could provide objective perspective on relationship termination rationale and boundary maintenance approaches. This validation provided external confirmation of decision-making quality, while building confidence for continued resistance to reconciliation pressure, despite potential social pressure or temporary emotional challenges. The emotional resilience building involved developing coping strategies for managing temporary loneliness, social pressure, or guilt manipulation that might arise during continued boundary enforcement. These strategies included support system activation, self-care protocol implementation, and perspective maintenance techniques that could prevent temporary emotional challenges from undermining long-term personal development objectives. The comprehensive preparation process also included final strategic planning for optimal timing and coordination of potential legal intervention if harassment escalation required formal protective measures. This planning involved documentation organization, legal resource preparation, and communication strategy development for addressing potential escalation while maintaining professional reputation and career advancement opportunities. The legal intervention preparation involved organizing comprehensive documentation of harassment patterns, communication attempts, and escalation indicators that would support formal complaint filing or restraining order applications if necessary. This documentation provided foundation for legal protection while demonstrating serious commitment to boundary enforcement that might discourage continued harassment attempts. The professional communication strategy addressed potential need for client notification, supervisor consultation, and colleague coordination if legal intervention became necessary for workplace protection. This strategy balanced privacy maintenance with professional responsibility, while ensuring career protection during potential legal proceedings. The final preparation phase included comprehensive review of alliance relationships, support system activation protocols, and strategic objective prioritization that would enable sustained progress toward personal development goals despite continued pressure from former relationship complications. This review ensured that harassment challenges would not compromise long-term strategic planning while providing foundation for continued growth despite temporary complications. The support system activation involved confirming availability and commitment from key allies who could provide emotional support, practical assistance, and professional guidance during potential escalation periods. This activation ensured comprehensive support network readiness, while building confidence for managing challenges that might exceed individual capability requirements. The strategic priority confirmation involved reviewing personal development objectives, professional advancement goals, and relationship standards that would guide decision-making during potential pressure periods. This confirmation provided clear framework for maintaining strategic focus despite temporary challenges, while ensuring continued progress toward comprehensive life development objectives that would create lasting satisfaction and fulfillment independent of former relationship complications or reconciliation pressure attempts. The confrontation arrived with the precision of a carefully orchestrated business presentation, though the venue was neither conference room nor professional setting. Instead, Jake had chosen the annual industry networking reception, hosted by the Greater Boston Marketing Association, an event where my attendance was both professionally necessary and publicly predictable through registration records accessible to members of our professional community. The strategic nature of his venue selection became immediately apparent upon my arrival at the reception. Jake had positioned himself near the registration area, where initial networking conversations typically occurred, ensuring that any interaction between us would be observed by colleagues whose professional opinions could influence career advancement opportunities. This positioning demonstrated sophisticated understanding of professional networking dynamics, while revealing his willingness to risk my career reputation for personal reconciliation objectives. The first indication of his preparation level came through observation of his appearance and demeanor, which reflected careful optimization for professional credibility and social influence, rather than emotional desperation that had characterized his previous communication attempts. His attire consisted of an impeccably tailored navy suit that projected executive presence, complemented by confident body language that suggested strategic planning rather than spontaneous emotional appeal. His positioning near prominent industry leaders indicated systematic networking preparation designed to establish social credibility while creating implicit pressure for professional courtesy during any public interaction. This approach demonstrated calculation that extended beyond emotional manipulation toward strategic application of professional relationship dynamics that could constrain my response options through workplace reputation considerations. The confrontation initiation occurred during my conversation with potential client representatives, who had expressed interest in strategic consulting services for technology marketing campaigns. Jake approached the group with practice to social confidence, introducing himself through professional credentials while referencing our previous relationship in terms that positioned him as concerned former partner rather than persistent harassment source. His opening communication employed sophisticated emotional manipulation techniques disguised as professional concern. "Emma, I've been worried about you since our misunderstanding," he stated within earshot of potential clients whose business relationships could be influenced by perceptions of my personal stability and professional judgment. The word choice transformed systematic relationship problems into temporary confusion while positioning my departure as emotional overreaction rather than rational decision based on documented behavioral patterns. The strategic nature of his language selection became apparent through his continued communication, which emphasized themes designed to generate sympathy while undermining my professional credibility. References to his confusion about my sudden departure, concern for my emotional well-being, and willingness to work through relationship difficulties created narrative that portrayed him as reasonable partner attempting to address problems through mature communication. However, the extensive preparation invested in communication skills development and boundary maintenance strategies enabled recognition of manipulation techniques that might otherwise have proven effective through social pressure and professional reputation concerns. The systematic training in assertive communication provided foundation for responding with clarity and professionalism, despite the challenging venue and audience. My response strategy involved immediate redirection toward factual information while maintaining professional demeanor appropriate for business networking environment. "Jake, as I've communicated previously, our relationship has ended. I would appreciate your respect for that decision and my professional boundaries." This language established clear position while demonstrating professional competence that countered attempts to portray my departure as emotional instability. The prepared response protocols proved essential for managing Jake's escalation attempts when initial manipulation strategies failed to achieve desired emotional reaction or social pressure effects. His subsequent communication included more direct emotional appeals combined with subtle threats regarding potential professional consequences if I continued refusing reconciliation discussions. "I think there's been some miscommunication that we should resolve privately," he continued, his voice carrying undertones that suggested potential professional complications if I maintained public boundary enforcement. This threat represented escalation toward professional intimidation, while maintaining plausible deniability through ambiguous language that could be interpreted as reasonable concern rather than coercive pressure. The professional audience context required response strategies that would demonstrate competence and stability, while clearly establishing boundaries without creating workplace drama that could damage career advancement opportunities. The extensive practice in conflict navigation under pressure proved crucial for maintaining appropriate professional demeanor while communicating firm boundaries about personal relationship termination. The systematic preparation for public confrontation scenarios enabled strategic communication that addressed both immediate boundary maintenance and long-term professional reputation protection. My response emphasized professional courtesy while establishing non-negotiable limits regarding personal relationship discussions in professional settings. I understand your concerns, but personal relationship matters are not appropriate topics for professional networking events, I replied, maintaining steady voice tone and confident body language that projected professional competence despite the challenging circumstances. This response demonstrated boundary maintenance capabilities while redirecting conversation toward appropriate professional context. The preparation investment in understanding Jake's personality patterns proved valuable for anticipating his response strategies when initial manipulation attempts failed to achieve desired outcomes. His escalation included more direct emotional appeals combined with implicit suggestions that my resistance to reconciliation demonstrated unreasonable stubbornness that might indicate broader professional judgment problems. However, the comprehensive communication skills development enabled maintenance of professional composure while clearly communicating that continued personal relationship pressure in professional settings would be considered harassment requiring formal intervention. This communication established serious consequences for continued boundary violations while maintaining appropriate professional tone for business environment. The turning point in the confrontation occurred when Jake realized that his manipulation strategies were not achieving desired emotional responses or social pressure effects. His confidence began to deteriorate as prepared responses countered each manipulation attempt, while professional allies who had been informed about potential harassment concerns provided subtle but visible support for boundary maintenance efforts. Sarah Martinez, who had been monitoring the situation from nearby networking conversations, approached during a natural pause in the interaction to provide professional intervention that demonstrated colleague support while redirecting conversation toward appropriate business topics. Her timing and approach reflected coordinated alliance support that had been developed through systematic relationship-building efforts. Emma, I wanted to introduce you to the marketing director from TechVision who was asking about your analytics expertise. Sarah interjected, providing natural transition away from personal relationship pressure, while demonstrating professional credibility and colleague support that countered Jake's attempts to portray me as isolated or emotionally unstable. The professional support demonstration proved crucial for establishing that boundary maintenance efforts had legitimate foundation rather than emotional overreaction that Jake had attempted to suggest through his communication strategies. The visible ally support provided validation for my professional judgment while creating social pressure for Jake to cease harassment attempts in professional settings. Jake's response to obvious professional support revealed the extent to which his reconciliation strategy had been based on assumptions about my isolation and vulnerability that were contradicted by evidence of strong professional relationships and colleague confidence in my judgment. His demeanor shifted from confident manipulation toward defensive uncertainty as social dynamics failed to develop according to his strategic expectations. The comprehensive preparation for potential legal intervention proved unnecessary during the immediate confrontation, but the visible confidence that preparation provided contributed significantly to effective boundary maintenance, while demonstrating serious commitment to harassment prevention that discouraged continued escalation attempts. The confrontation resolution occurred through Jake's recognition that continued pressure attempts would generate increasing professional and social consequences without achieving reconciliation objectives. His strategic retreat involved face-saving communication that maintained plausible deniability, while effectively conceding that manipulation strategies had failed to overcome boundary maintenance capabilities. I hope you'll reconsider when you've had more time to think about everything, he concluded, his tone suggesting ongoing emotional investment while acknowledging immediate tactical failure. This communication represented strategic withdrawal while preserving potential for future manipulation attempts through continued contact justification. However, the successful boundary maintenance during high-pressure public confrontation provided comprehensive validation for relationship termination decisions, while demonstrating that systematic preparation could enable effective resistance to sophisticated manipulation strategies. The professional setting management proved that career advancement could be maintained despite personal relationship complications through strategic planning and ally support development. The aftermath of the confrontation included immediate professional relationship strengthening as colleagues who had observed the interaction expressed support for boundary maintenance, while providing validation for professional judgment and competence. This support confirmed that systematic preparation for potential harassment scenarios had been appropriate, while demonstrating that professional reputation could be protected through strategic communication and ally coordination. The comprehensive success of preparation strategies during the ultimate confrontation test provided foundation for continued boundary maintenance, while eliminating doubts about relationship termination necessity. The systematic investment in communication skills, professional alliance development, and strategic planning had enabled transformation from vulnerable accommodation patterns toward empowered boundary enforcement that could maintain personal standards despite sophisticated pressure tactics. Most significantly, the confrontation experience demonstrated that extensive preparation and systematic skill development could overcome natural disadvantages in confidence and assertiveness that had previously enabled manipulation and boundary violations. The transformation from accommodation-oriented relationship partner toward strategic boundary maintenance represented fundamental personal development that would prevent similar problems in future relationships while enabling authentic partnership based on mutual respect rather than systematic accommodation of dismissive treatment. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.